Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Ask the Experts, all about Gmail. My name is Tom Sather. I'm Senior Director of Research here at ReturnPath, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. Throughout our presentation, we encourage you to interact with our presenters by typing in questions and comments using the question pane in the lower left-hand corner. We'll be answering questions during and after the presentation. And yes, we are recording today's session. We'll make that link available shortly after the webinar ends. It will also be available on demand on the returnpath.com site in our resource section. I'm also excited to be joined today by Henry Hudrez and Matt Mikolajczyk. Henry is an email strategist for ReturnPath's professional service team. His current role includes executing client-specific projects to maximize ROI and deliverability. Overall, he has worked in the email industry for almost 12 years with experience as both an analyst for an ESP and on AOL's Postmaster team. Matt Mikolajczyk, Principal Technical Account Manager, has been with ReturnPath for 5 years, focused on understanding the technical challenges global brands face each day in their pursuit of optimizing email program results. As a Principal Technical Account Manager at ReturnPath, Matt works closely with clients to diagnose and resolve critical issues impacting program performance, and is a regular contributor to ReturnPath's Ask the Experts series. So thank you all for joining today. We will be obviously going over an overview of Gmail categories and tabs. We've done some recent research on that. If you haven't downloaded the paper yet, you can get a copy of that in our resource section on returnpath.com. We also asked a lot of our customers for some questions in advance, so we'll be answering those during this webinar. And then we're going to save about 15 or 20 minutes at the end of this webinar and do live Q&A. So again, if you have any questions that you want answered and you haven't submitted them in advance, you can go ahead and do that in the question pane in the lower left-hand corner. If you have any questions that come up during the webinar, please do that and we will flag those and answer those during the Q&A. So if you're not familiar with ReturnPath, we've been around for about 17 years. We have over 500 people around the world, 14 offices in 17 countries. We cover over 2 billion inboxes with our certification whitelisting program. We score tens of millions of IP addresses every day and have over 300 global partners. And also we help over 2,500 customers optimize their email marketing program, including retail, tech, finance, and more. And then also we have a fantastic service team here that have unparalleled email expertise. They are some of the brightest minds in email optimization. I think collectively over 2,000 years of email experience, and we're here to really help marketers drive better relationships with their customers, get opens and clicks, and get more money. So now let's talk about Gmail categories and tabs. So I want to, before we go into some of those questions that we submitted, that everyone submitted in advance, I want to talk about what it is and what it isn't. So here are the tabs that you will see within Gmail. So the social tab includes things like social notifications and social updates. Those would be things like from Facebook, LinkedIn, notifications, etc. In the promotions tab, which is probably why most of you are here, that includes your email marketing promotions and offers. And updates are more your transactional emails. Those would be things like e-receipts, shipping notifications, and the like. Forums, which is less widely used, is primarily for mailing lists and groups. And the primary tab is just really personal emails and messages from senders where categories where the tab isn't turned on. So meaning, give a little bit of a definition more of that. So every email that comes in through the Gmail gateway is categorized with one of these four categories: social, promotions, updates, or forum. If Gmail isn't smart enough or can't figure out how to classify that email, it won't put a label on it, and therefore it will get delivered into your primary tab, but only if it reaches the inbox. So this is a point of confusion, I think, with a lot of marketers thinking that the primary tab, if I'm going into the primary tab, it means that I've somehow figured out some secret code that Gmail is doing. Really all that means is that when Gmail does the classifications, it says, okay, this isn't a social email, doesn't look like a promotion, definitely doesn't look like an update or a forum. We don't know what it is, so we're just going to deliver it to their inbox if the spam folder doesn't catch it first. So if it does pass the spam folder, it will get delivered to the inbox. If we have the tabs turned on, it will be delivered in primary. The other thing to keep in mind too is that these are customizable. So that it means that Gmail users can turn them all off, or they can have a combination of them. And really the I'll talk about this in a bit. The most popular ones are promotions as well as social because those are on by default. But let's say that I do turn on just updates, or excuse me, just promotions, and an email comes in classified as an update. Where does that get delivered? It will be delivered, in fact, to your primary inbox. So if they don't have that tab turned on, it doesn't mean that it goes to the spam folder or just some other mysterious tab. It just will get delivered into the primary tab. So yes, that means that if I have social updates and forums enabled, but I don't have promotions enabled, all my promotions will go into the inbox. That is if it gets past the spam folder or the spam filters, because it still has to go through that. So I wanted to give some clarification around that, which will give a little bit more context in a lot of the questions and our answers that we're going to be covering here today. So in over the next 20 to 30 minutes, we'll be covering a lot of these questions that we asked a lot of our customers to submit in advance. We got a lot of good ones, and some of them we get asked frequently. So I pulled some of those out here, and we can answer those with some of our research and findings. Probably one of the most popular questions we get is how does Gmail then determine placement for the incoming emails? So like I stated, it does analyze all the emails going through, puts a stamp or a classification on there. How does it do it? Well, it learns about all of your emails through machine learning, pattern matching, and user feedback. And really machine learning is kind of the key thing here. It feeds a lot of Gmail products today, including, if you're familiar with the new client that Gmail had created, which is called Inbox by Gmail, that also uses the same classification system. Except what it does is it will bundle those into similar emails. So for example, it will actually create a bundle of trips based on contextual information. So things like airline reservations, car reservations, hotel reservations. It will know based around the city and the time of your trip to know that this is a trip that you're taking. It will bundle that so you can access all the information in one spot. So yes, trips is not a current classification, or finance. As you can see, there is a current classification with Gmail and their tabs, but we may see that in the future. Who knows? Also, Smart Reply, if you may have read in the news, they released this about a year ago, but they can now intelligently give short replies to emails based on the context or the copy within that email. So here's an example that I just sent to myself so you can kind of see it. This appears with an Inbox by Gmail, and you can just reply with a quick response. And then also, probably a bane in all of our existence here on the phone today is spam filtering. So Matt's going to talk about that a little bit too. But machine learning, it does learn exactly what is spam and what isn't. And like I mentioned in the previous slide here, that is all being taught through user feedback. So for example, if an email is being misclassified, for example, like an e-receipts being misclassified as a promotion, a lot of Gmail's machine learning will rely on the fact that Gmail users to drag that into the correct folder. If you get enough people to do that, it does teach the algorithm that in fact that is a promotional email. So one question we get asked a lot is if a lot of people actually are using tabs, and I think the question kind of spurs from the fact, do I need to worry about it as a marketer? Meaning, is it something that 75% of Gmail users are using and they all have the promotions tab on, and are they ignoring it? So we can answer some of that. We did a survey in our report and asked Gmail users if they were actually using tabs or had that enabled. We found that about 34% of users were actually had the tabs enabled, so about a little over 1 in 3 we're currently using tabs. So it wasn't obviously a majority of people are using it, but it's still significant enough that it could have an impact on your program. And as I mentioned previously too, social and promotions were the most widely used tabs, and that's purely just because that when you sign up for a new Gmail account, those are the 2 tabs that are enabled by default. So it looks like most people don't turn those off if they do keep the tabs enabled, because they find those to be useful. And then also followed by updates, and then to a lesser extent forums. So most people don't belong to groups, user groups anymore, so not surprising in that. And I think for updates, because they are important, they're transactional messages, people just either choose to keep that off because they like to see those emails go into their primary folder. So another question too, and this is probably the #1 question that I get, and probably Henry and Matt too, but how do I escape the promotions folder? Someone someone said that no one checks that tab. And I also hear quite frequently that that promotional email goes to the promo tab to die. And that's not quite the case. So about when we did a survey with Gmail users, we found that almost half of them were checking the promotions folder daily or more. And if we add in weekly, then it's almost 75%. But only about 1 in 5 said that they never check that folder. So for about 20% of people, you could say the promotions go there to die. Chances are that they may have a secondary account where they check that. Another question too that we got is, how can I help ensure that my transactional emails don't land in the promotions tab? So of course, like I said, transactional emails are extremely important to to senders. There are some email service providers out there like SendGrid that have devoted their entire business model to transactional email. A lot of times we get caught up in the promotional email because it does drive money, but transactional email is just as important for senders. So the good news is that Gmail is fairly accurate in classifying their emails, but about 1 in 10 Gmail users do report some issues in sorting of their emails. One example that I have when talking to somebody or interviewing somebody during the survey was that this person was standing in line at the airline check-in and needed to pull out her ticket. She wasn't able to find it, and she was going through her updates folder to try to find it because that's where all of her travel emails were. Unfortunately, she couldn't find it, had to run up and print out a ticket, and nearly missed her flight as a result. And later on, she went to go look for it and actually found that it was the reason she couldn't find it was because it was being misclassified as a promotion. So you can see that it really it can cause problems, and when it will cause problems, it will be at the worst time for the user. So it can be important for then marketers to really pay attention to how their emails are getting classified so that they can create the best experience for their users. And so there's a variety of, there's 3 pillars here that Gmail in ReturnPath recommends that senders do to avoid misclassification. One is to identify yourself and be consistent with that. And a lot of times too we call that sender permanence. But this is slightly different. We're talking about using a consistent from address. So Gmail does tie your not only your reputation to your domain and from address, but also your IP address and your authentication records, specifically DKIM and SPF, and as well as DMARC. Having those will not only improve your placement problems, but will actually help Gmail classify the emails coming through. Reason for that is on the second pillar, is because then you can start to even segment, use unique domains or from addresses for each of those mail streams. So for example, it's recommended that if you are sending promotional email and transactional email, to actually send it out from a separate domain that also has a separate authentication record. And if you're still having problems, then you may even want to try using a dedicated IP address for those different types of email streams. Gmail does state that it does primarily look at the domain for this, but again, they will rely on IP if they can't make any connections in there. And then for content, what you want to make sure when you're looking at your content is, do you have any type of promotional material in there? Because according to, obviously with the CAN-SPAM Act here in America, is that you can include some material, but the intent of the email needs to be transactional in nature. So there's always been a lot of weird loose rules around the type of amount of promotional content that you include in an email. But if you do include something in there like click here to get your 30% off coupon or something like that within your receipt, keep in mind that things like that may actually be triggering Gmail's classification system to make it look like a promotion. So those are kind of the 3 areas that you need to look at. And then again, if just because you change that immediately, you may not see a change in how your emails are being classified, because like I stated before, they're using machine learning to do this, and how they train those algorithms is by relying on their users to tell them what is correct. And that is even the same with the spam folder. So another question we got too is, what are the average open rates of the various tabs within Gmail? So, so I'm going to show those in a second. I'll give a little bit of a background here. So a number of years ago we did a similar study with Gmail when it just came out, when the classifications and the tabs just came out. At that time, users had to self-select into that, so we were able to determine if they had the tabs enabled, which tabs they had enabled, and what they were reading. And when it was first introduced, we actually found that emails in the promotion tab were read at a higher rate than most of the other tabs. And specifically, emails that were going into the primary that were misclassified, basically not classified, so they're delivered to primary, actually had a lower rate, and then had a higher spam complaint rate. And the reason why is because users didn't want that in their primary folder. They wanted their promotions to be sorted into the promotions folder so they can pay attention to that when they're in the mood for, for shopping. The same thing with social forums and updates. Now, 4 years later, unfortunately we don't have the insight with our data to know exactly if they have the tab enabled or not. But like I mentioned, all emails coming in through the gateway are classified. So what I can tell you is, for all the emails coming in through the gateway for promotions, only about 85% of those reach the inbox, and were read about 19% of the time. And for emails that weren't classified, as you can see, their spam folder rating was much lower, but they were still read 22% of the time. For social, inbox placement rate of 87% with a read rate of 22%, forums 78%, read rate of 21%, and updates 87%, and a highest read rate of 28%, which makes sense because, like I mentioned, those are the emails that people want to open. There are things like your bank statements, and things like that. So they are important. But just because the promotions classified emails here have a lower read rate doesn't necessarily mean that it's due to the tab. It could actually be the lower read rate, in this case, could be dragging down for those that don't have tabs enabled because maybe they're just too overwhelmed with the amount of emails in their inbox. So just wanted to make that point because this doesn't directly cause any there's no direct correlation between the tab and the read rate because we don't have access to that data. And another question we get to quite a bit, if marketers are having problems or they think they are getting a lower read rate due to the promotions tab, they want to ask, how do we actually get people to move us to the primary tab? Is it something that we should do one time, or is it something we need to do on a consistent basis? So I went into our own emails and did a search. I actually had to search quite far to find any usage of this anymore. It was quite popular when the tabs came out because I think a lot of marketers were anxious and nervous about the impact they would have on their own marketing programs. But as it turned out, it didn't, so a lot of marketers just abandoned this. But I did find within, and these examples are about a year old, and this is probably the most recent example I could find. And this is through the center, the brand called Huckberry. They sent out a one-time email giving instructions for their users that if they were, if they're having their emails go into the promotions tab and they're losing them, to drag them into the primary tab. They also created a GIF so people could click on that and watch that. And so I don't know exactly how that performed because we can't actually see the movements between the folders for Huckberry. But here's an example that you could use. You could test this out. I would recommend doing it probably more than once just because you're going to have about 20% of your readers probably even seeing this message. So you may want to just keep resending it to the non-responders, and then measure after a while, after maybe a few weeks, to see if your open rates start to increase at Gmail. If you don't see any change, then it's probably not something you want to continue. But if you want to do it on a continuous over a continual time frame, here's an example from a sender where they just put it into their pre-header. So every time their emails are in the inbox, you can see that, in this case, it did get delivered to my promotions tab, so this is something that I would see as I'm scanning my inbox. So if it is important to me, it may be a reminder to me to drag that over. So it's up to you as a marketer, though, if you want to use that pre-header real estate to get people to move over. And again, there may be a test you want to do over a time frame of a month or a couple months just to see if it has any impact over the long term. But really the bigger story here is that we have seen and heard anecdotal evidence from a lot of senders that they haven't had they weren't able to move the needle very much with these impacts, and as a result they've dropped this altogether because they want to just focus on their current email marketing tactics. And so now we have some others here too that are related to Gmail, not necessarily about the tabs. We thought these were important because we get asked them quite a bit. So I'm going to pass this off to Matt, and he'll provide some insight about Gmail and how you can reach the inbox.
Hey, thanks, Tom. So this first question is particularly interesting for a number of reasons. We talk so much about Gmail in particular being a heavy believer in machine learning. I think we all are now these days. The question reads, I believe Gmail uses machine algorithms to determine inbox placement, but what elements like IP reputation, engagement levels are weighted higher than others? For example, I've recently found the spam box be filled with emails from advertisers that I have engaged with before. So this is a particularly interesting example. One of the things that we've been studying on the return path side and investing a lot of time and resources in more recently to kind of get a pulse on the process and what really makes Gmail tick. So the first thing to remember is that one of the main guiding principles, whether you're Gmail or whether you're a Yahoo or any other mailbox provider, is that they want to establish a solid baseline on your IP and your domain, and that the more data they have, the faster this process plays out. So one observation, and kind of to this question's point, that we're beginning to see replicated within our consumer panel is that for some senders, Gmail will place messages in the inbox who exhibit low overall engagement, and those who also have low engagement with that sender's domain itself. So it seems counterintuitive, but ultimately Gmail is guided by that principle that an individual's lack of engagement doesn't benefit their overall goal of obtaining meaningful data on customer preference. So the next kind of logical step in that would be if they're able to place more mail in an inbox, they increase the likelihood that mail will be opened and clicked, and you can build an effective customer profile. So this next slide is the two stages, if you will, of what we know or believe to be kind of the machine learning elements of Gmail. So first and foremost, and I'm going to go ahead and skip to the next slide here. Where'd it go? Hey, Tom, do you mind? Shoot me. There we go. So basically we've got two stages of evaluation, one at the gateway and then one at the delivery agent. So at the gateway, what Google seems to be doing is assessing similar elements that we know, historically to be relevant. IP reputation. Are you on any blacklists? What's your overall kind of global engagement with other mail out there in the email universe, right? So this seems to set the default state for a domain or an IP at a point in time. What that basically means is this domain or IP's default state is either going to be inbox, spam, or blocked entirely. That second stage, if you're not blocked outright, will be at the delivery agent. And this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. So through our consumer network research, we've observed, again, some highly engaged subscribers who are getting delivered at a lower rate than engaged customers. So from that network and from our observations, it appears that this is at least in part due to relative engagement filtering. And by this, I mean subscriber engagement with a domain is compared to subscriber engagement with the rest of their mailbox. So in other words, if a subscriber engages less with a particular domain than with other mail they receive, it may go to the spam folder. So conversely, if there's not enough data about the domain or a customer's interaction with the domain, it appears to deliver based on those gateway spam inbox block outright decision rules at the gateway. So again, this is pretty high level, and there's certainly a lot of nuances with it, but ultimately, it's broken down into two buckets there. So really good question, something we're particularly interested in moving forward as an organization. But moving on, the next question is, how accurate are Gmail's listed reasons for ending up in the spam folder? For example, we found many similar messages as spam, or quote, content of your message resembles that of spam, and so on. So first and foremost, the idea that the reasons or maybe a particular postmaster site is a bit lacking in actionable details as to why you might be exhibiting or experiencing delivery problems is nothing new. So if you've ever been to a Gmail, a Hotmail, a Yahoo, Earthlink, et cetera, postmaster page, you know that it's generally broad in nature. And just thinking about the kind of parameters around relative versus global engagement, that larger machine learning algorithm process, these postmaster sites ultimately have to be a bit broad. But with that, even if you're seeing something that is not easily explained by way of the postmaster site, keep in mind that their goal is not to point you in the direction of 100% deliverability, 100% placement. Their goal is to protect their customers. But generally speaking, any and most issues you're seeing that is impeding delivery of good mail to the inbox is often tied to a lapse in either best practices or kind of a systemic issue in process. So a couple of examples are your feedback loop connections severed. So oftentimes we see clients who kind of unexpectedly fall off an AOL feedback loop or fall off a Hotmail feedback loop. Gmail has a feedback loop as well. So that's just one case in point. Accidental deployments are certainly another example. If you've ever been a campaign manager and accidentally sent a full file of 25 million subscribers to what was supposed to go to a highly targeted, segmented group, then likely you've dealt with those repercussions, increasing complaints, unknown users, so on and so forth. Those measures of deliverability that contribute to overall reputation. Another example, application misfire. So if you've ever had a rogue application go haywire, send thousands of messages to one individual, it happens. So oftentimes when you're in the wake or dealing with the fallout or collateral of such an event, the postmaster site is inevitably the first place that you turn, and then inevitably you have more questions, right? So ultimately, there are some baseline checks and considerations when you're experiencing that type of experience with a postmaster. Make sure that you have a good pulse on customer engagement. So managing the experience subscribers go through as they progress through and along that program lifecycle is really key. Are you treating those folks who engage more with the brand the same way that you're treating those who engage less with the brand? And if you are, you might want to think about how you can differentiate and really define what that customer experience looks like. From the subscriber's point of view, that's really critical. Oftentimes senders run into situations where their recipients or their customers are confused as to why they are receiving this particular message. That ultimately drives negative engagement or lack of engagement, and cues or tips off the ISP, the mailbox provider, that you're not doing your part to provide a good customer experience. Similarly, user-marked spam complaints. Even if you're not seeing something, particularly at Gmail that cues you off, if there's broader trends happening where a particular campaign or a particular population was happening to see an increase or a spike in complaints, being able to isolate those incidents is key, and backtracking thereafter, maybe to a particular job or what have you. So those are really good indicators as to what could be ultimately driving those quote-unquote gray responses from Google or from Hotmail, et cetera. Spam traps as well. Telltale sign, if you're hitting spam traps, you definitely are being kind of evaluated potentially as someone who's not on top of their list quality. Pristine traps indicate that you've maybe bought a list, or you're just really, really remiss in maintaining proper list quality. So baseline checks oftentimes, and these considerations oftentimes going to lead you down the right path to managing mitigation with ISPs. Okay, next question. What is the best way to test an email template for Gmail deliverability issues? And I chose this. It's a bit more broad than just, say, for example, Gmail. But the guiding principle here is that whether you're talking about pre-deployment production or post-deployment analysis, you want to be on top of what could be triggering poor placement, poor deliverability at multiple ISPs. So for those of you who are return path customers, you might know Inbox Preview to be particularly helpful in this. Most recently, we've rolled up both Litmus and Email on Acid technologies to get a sense of how your emails are rendering in a particular environment, a particular device, particular email client. So we can instantly preview renderings across more than 50 desktop, mobile, and email clients. What are those most popular devices? And as far as spam filter testing, the tool itself also allows you to test against the most popular spam filters, Gmail included. Automatically test your URLs, identify broken links, all of those things that would tip off a mailbox provider that maybe something looks a bit off. So having your content, your coding, your creative all buttoned up and optimized for any potential environment that you'll be sending to is really, really critical. Additionally, Inbox Monitor, again, for those clients or for those folks who are customers of Return Path, inevitably know that Inbox Monitor is really key in understanding if your pre-deployment creative or content testing has paid dividends. So, deliverability we know is just more than hitting send, looking at your delivered rate, and then that's that. So you want to be able to quickly identify, your true placement. What are driving, what are the driving factors that might be contributing to diminished performance? And Inbox Monitor is great for that. On top of just seed data, we also have a consumer network of 2.5 million individuals who provide really, really rich placement data alongside of some behavioral data as well. So pre and post deployment analysis and steps and care should be taken for getting not only into the inbox of Gmail, but for any ISP that where your customers live. So with that, I'm going to pass the microphone over to Henry, and he's going to take some more of your questions.
Great, thanks, Matt. So I'll jump right into the next question here. Let me go to the next slide. So the next question is, what are the best ways to find out if you have a deliverability issue with Gmail? So there were several questions around data that's available for troubleshooting. So I'll try to consolidate them all into this section with tools that I use on a day-to-day basis to help out my clients. So obviously we'll start off with return path data that's available to me and our customers, but also just because I find it extremely useful to have these different angles and different metrics that I can look at. The first one I know that Matt was talking about briefly was seed data that go to our test accounts. It's a good way to identify any major flags with heavy spam foldering or blocks. And taking it a step further, return path can get more granular, measuring inbox placement by accessing our panel data that overlaps with your subscribers. This now takes into account all filters, including personal ones, as Matt was discussing, different layers, by seeing the final destination of your campaign to your own subscribers. Metrics from the Reputation Monitor tool are also a very important step. So ReturnPath gets specific metrics back from other mailbox providers that reflect your reputation, list quality, and overall success. Among other things here, I'm looking for bounces, complaints, and spam traps, and also trying to line them up with dates to see if I can pinpoint a specific problem. Usually these are good at telling a story of what's going on or if anything's changed recently, so really helpful metrics there to break down. The last tool I'll cover here also dives into our panel data. By accessing subscribers' inboxes, we're also able to see how active they are with their account as a whole, so not just with your campaigns. So we're able to classify subscribers based on how many times they access their inboxes and read their mail. So in the example here, you can see 67% is made up of primary accounts, which usually log in on a daily basis and receive personal emails there, which are pretty much the type that we generally want to make up our database. The last two are secondary accounts that are rarely logged into or dead accounts that haven't been accessed in an extended period of time. Both of those total 33% here, which is a significant portion, and as we'll talk about later and as also touched on earlier, inactive members will hurt your reputation, so this is something definitely that you want to monitor. So this next slide is an external tool, which is obviously helpful in troubleshooting Gmail, and that's their very own Google Postmaster tool, which was debuted, I think, in July of last year. So that was super great news. Obviously, Google or Gmail is a really important piece or element to your database. It probably comprises most of your list. So that was a popular one to go after. In order to get it set up, you need to make some quick changes to your DNS and verify ownership. But once you have that set up, you should see the screen that's there, which has your sending domain ready to look at with all the different tabs that are available on the left-hand side here that you can see. I'm not going to go into all of the tabs and tools that the tool offers, but I will look at some of the more relevant ones when troubleshooting an issue. So first up is spam rate, which is spam complaints divided by the number of messages received in the inbox. Every article, webinar, or white paper you come across will tell you the same thing, that complaints are still a fundamental driver in deciding where your campaigns end up. So there are still hundreds of other checks and filters, but complaints will definitely get you in trouble if you let them. Usually as a rule of thumb, we say to stay below 0.1% for complaints. It should keep you away from harm, but that still depends on your performance on other metrics and filter checks as well. Looking at this graph, you'll want to look for any problematic spikes or dates. Once again, once you have those, you'll look for anything different that you did that day, whether you implemented a new list, sent out new content, added a new brand, or any other change that might point to the cause. If it's not, if there's no noticeable one-off spikes and it's consistently high, then you should reevaluate your acquisition sources, your unsubscribe process, frequency, and even content relevancy to your subscribers. The example here that I put is kind of boring, so there's not much action going on, but that's pretty much the goal, is to keep your graphs low and boring. So next up we have domain and IP reputation, which you've seen probably similar stuff in Microsoft SNDS if you've used that tool before. In the interest of time, I'll be brief and just say that the biggest takeaway here is that domain reputation does matter, that you should be keeping track of that aside, along with IP reputation. I've seen different domains perform differently on a consistent basis that share the same IPs. So domain reputation with Gmail does matter, and something that you should keep an eye on across all of your sending platforms. And the other thing that we'll talk about when removing inactives as well is that this is just happens to be an example of a client that started focusing on the more engaged part of his list and ended up getting into the green category or high category within a few campaigns. So fairly quick turnaround. We'll discuss that a little bit more later. The next one is pretty brief too, but we found some questions coming in around authentication and its importance. I think I actually saw another question that came in through the chat. So this would be the tab that you would go to check what Gmail is seeing in regards to your authentication. So you can see here in this graph, DKIM and SPF are passing 100% for that time frame, and DMARC is at 0%, which is not an absolute necessity, but it's still good, a good tool to help with security if you're having kind of spoofing issues or anything with security related. That's something that you can go after as well. It's good, and I know that people write this off once they get that implemented successfully when setting up IPs or domains, but it's just good to every so often come in and check this graph as well to make sure everything is up and running. So the next question is the $1 million one, which I think was a huge bulk of the ones that we got, which is what are quick tricks for improving deliverability? So specifically, questions were asked about faster results and shortcuts and bypassing filters. And unfortunately, there isn't anything, any quick shortcut to bypass filters, but there are some recommendations that can help turn around reputation fairly quickly, and I'll go through two of those now. And we'll start off with the hardest one, which is to reduce the size of your database and really target your more active subscribers. It's a conversation that's quite difficult to have, and I have them all the time, so I completely get it. But what centers don't realize is that maybe the majority of their email is going to secondary or dead accounts, as we discussed previously, or even piling up in spam folders after subscribers have complained. So removing inactives are one of the main ways of getting rid of those off of your list. And unfortunately, Gmail and other mailbox providers care very much about your list quality and have the ability to measure the activity level and list quality that you have for your marketing program. So the quickest way to increase Gmail deliverability that I have seen is to remove inactive subscribers from your deployments or focus on your most engaged. To give you an extreme case, there was a sender who was extremely frustrated, was getting 0% of the inbox, and decided to chop down his list to people who have opened or clicked in the last 2 to 3 weeks. That had immediate results, driving their inbox deliverability from 0 to 100% within a few days. And then they began to add the rest of their database in buckets to try to help identify where the breaking point was in regard to activity. So obviously this is extremely drastic, and sending to that small of a list isn't realistic or sustainable long term, and may have frightened some of you to hear. But you definitely don't need to be that drastic in your approach. But the point here is that a change in reputation could happen that fast if you really wanted it to. So Gmail reacts really quickly to what's going on with your metrics and your list quality and everything else that we've discussed already today. Some of the less drastic cases are when centers cut back open to clicks to the last 3 or maybe 6 months, and that shows progress as well. Again, it depends what your starting point is, right? If you've never removed inactives and you have a 10-year-old database versus someone who removes inactives after 1 year. So the progress that you'll see with that will vary significantly from sender to sender. But again, you have to remember that this is just a piece of the huge puzzle or the huge algorithm that Gmail employs with your campaign. So it's also really dependent on the other factors that are involved and how your metrics are performing elsewhere. The other recommendation that might be easier on the heart is to reduce frequency for inactive members. If someone hasn't opened an email in 1, 2, or even 3 years, the chances of them opening aren't looking too great. So reducing how much you email those specific members will help minimize the dead weight that you carry and increase the percentage of active subscribers in your sends. So this may be one of the first approaches, and probably easier ones to address when considering removing inactives, or at least dropping frequency. And the last one here is to reduce complaints. So if removing inactives isn't helping, then maybe there's a problem with your onboarding process where complaints are coming in on the first few campaigns. Because complaints is such a big driver, as we said before, it's another way to get a quick turnaround. So you want to look at any changes that you've made, that you implement a light box or a pop-up box that doesn't let you exit out on your homepage unless you supply an email address, purchase lists, pre-check options, or anything else that auto-opts in your subscribers. So those are definitely going to bring on complaints in the initial phase of the life cycle, so that's something that you would want to address. And then obviously addressing your unsubscribe process, making sure that that's not a pain to go through, and then also implementing a list unsubscribe header. So addressing those two bullets make it easier for someone to unsubscribe, which seems counterintuitive because you don't want your list to go down in size, but unsubscribes are not a bad thing. It doesn't affect your reputation in any way. What does affect your reputation are complaints and inactive subscribers, as we discussed. So the recommendations to optimize your unsubscribe process can only help your reputation. So again, these two recommendations aren't the answer to everyone's problem, but are usually what we see turn things around fairly quickly in some of the more common issues that we see. And now I'm going to pass that back over to Tom to discuss a little bit about the Help Center.
Yeah, thanks, Henry. Thanks, Matt. So just want to remind everyone here on the call today about our Help Center. So if you go to help.returnpath.com, you can see that image right there. And it's 24 access to all of our resources that help our customers troubleshoot issues when they need it. So it includes things like troubleshooting documents, videos, best practice guides, ebooks. You can even support tickets. If you aren't a customer, you can still go there and you can access information about our products, including certification, our sender education program, and more. So go ahead and check it out. Also, if you are curious, again, in this report, if you haven't downloaded yet, you can go to our resource section on returnpath.com for an access to that. So now we're going to some live Q&A. So we got wow, a lot of questions here and a lot of great questions. So I'm going to answer some of these that were related to the topics that we were talking about that we can knock out quickly, and then Henry and Matt, I'll throw some at you as well. But someone here asked how many Gmail users were surveyed. No numbers were mentioned. So sorry about that. I did not mention the number of survey takers for this. So we administered the survey through Google Consumer Surveys, who selects the statistically significant amount of respondents for that. And for this survey, we had approximately 1,200 people responding and giving answers for this survey. The other question, too, we had was around Gmail's feedback loop. So Matt, I'm going to throw this at you. I can answer this as well, but and Henry probably can as well. But it was about Gmail's feedback loop. So we had some questions around it. Some people were surprised that Gmail offers a feedback loop, but probably there should be an asterisk on that, right? Matt?
Yep, sorry, someone's on mute. Yeah, so the asterisk there is primarily the Gmail feedback loop is leveraged mostly by ESPs. It's not the same traditional setup as what you might know to be true with like Yahoo or Microsoft, where you're getting kind of a daily complaint roll-up for folks who have marked your mail as spam. It's a bit more removed from the actual sender. And that's just kind of telltale of how Gmail operates. They're playing everything pretty close to the vest, but that's the asterisk, at least from the feedback loop perspective.
Yeah. So I think to answer the question, if you're curious in that feedback loop, to talk to your email service provider if you are using one, they're the ones that have to submit that. I believe it is still, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt or Henry, but I think it's still in beta. So they're still testing it out. They may have plans to roll this out to directly to senders at some point, but currently they don't have access to that. But Henry, you talked about this a little bit in one of the questions. So if let's say that the people listening today, for whatever reason, can't get the feedback loop access through their ESP, is there still a way to maybe remove those people if they do report their email as spam?
Yeah, so I think the best way is what I was discussing in the last slide there is removing inactive subscribers. So once someone hits this is spam, that message is going to their spam folder. They're not opening it, clicking, or engaging with it. So I think the best way to remove those from your list are eventually they should get hit with your inactive removal policy, depending on what you've classified that as.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and Henry had also mentioned too the list unsubscribe header. So
right.
When you do report emails as spam, people will also be asked if they want to be removed, and so that would be a great way. You can identify those that complain and kind of get some of the access there, as we refer to it as here internally as it's Gmail's poor man's feedback loop, because it's not centrally administered by any email. Or any email provider. It's done strictly through that unsubscribe header mechanism. So another question here too that we had, and I believe both Matt and Henry, you talked a little bit about this, but how does ReturnPath ensure that Gmail placement numbers are accurately reflecting the placement in my list? So if a seed list customer never clicks on my emails, right? So if I'm sending to a seed list, and for those of you that are listening aren't familiar, what is it? You're probably thinking, what in the heck is a seed list? Well, a seed list is just a list of dummy accounts, right? So ReturnPath, we mentioned this before, but we sign up for over I forget what it is, like over 100 ISPs. We sign up for email accounts there. No one actually administers those accounts. But then we give those to our customers. They send email to these dummy accounts, and then our machine automatically goes in, scrapes the inbox, and reports in the tool where that email was delivered. So the question there is, okay, well, if these dummy accounts, right, these aren't real people doing it, how do I know that it's accurate, right? How do I know that the information I'm getting back in my inbox monitoring tool is going to be accurate if it's based on engagement? Henry or Matt, do you want to maybe address that one?
Sure, I can take that, and Henry, feel free to chime in if I missed something. But the primary thing that we're trying to accomplish with seeds alone are to establish kind of the global decision rule at the gateway for, in this case, Gmail subscribers. The same can be true for Yahoo, but when you think about those more broad gateway considerations, IP reputation, blacklistings, the overall health of the domain, so on and so forth, the seeds do a really good job of kind of providing a proxy for that kind of go, no-go. So inbox, spam, missing. Additionally, and I think it's worth noting here is, when kind of referring back to my topic on the delivery agent or the relative subscriber engagement, the panel, as we call it, the consumer network, when we talk about the differentiation between seed data and ReturnPath consumer network data, which are those live customers, gives you kind of an additional layer of specificity around that relative subscriber level engagement. So on one hand, the seeds do a really great job of providing the global decision, go, no go, and then after that we start to factor in the individual user level engagement that is exhibited within the consumer network.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So I think, yeah, that it's really important here that, especially if you're looking for an inbox monitoring vendor or partner, is to make sure that, because that is real. What Matt's talking about is real, and the person that was asking was spot on. If you're just relying on seeds to measure placement at the larger email providers like Gmail, it's likely you're not getting accurate results. So you're throwing your money away. So you need to have another layer added on there, which at ReturnPath we do have what we call our consumer panel. And these are consists of nearly 3 million real-life users of Gmail and Yahoo and Microsoft and other domains. And they, with their permission, give us anonymized insight into the emails that they're receiving and how they interact and engage with that. And so within our tools, if we have enough panelists for your specific campaign that you're sending out, we will, of course, display those real-life users in your campaign as opposed to just the dummy account. So you can get a better idea and a more accurate look of how your emails are being delivered. So another question we had here is someone is asking, and I think Henry, you were covering this, and Matt, you may have as well, but how do we access the Postmaster tool, and is that available to everyone?
Yeah, and I forgot to mention that it's if you go to postmaster.google.com, there are some specific instructions there to help set that up for you. So we just involve some quick DNS changes and some verification, and you should be all set to go in accessing all the tools that were visited today on the slides.
Great, thank you. So we just have a couple minutes. I think we get through a couple more questions here. So Matt, the question is, how is it different between, say, B2B subscribers, that use Google Apps compared to the consumer Gmail? How does inbox placement and the decision factoring differ for those?
Yep. So that's a good question, and by and large, when you talk about enterprise solutions or applications that protect XYZ corporation at the gateway, the thing to consider and the thing to remember is, regardless of whether we're talking about Gmail, Google Apps, what have you, or other solutions, those applications are highly configurable at that gateway. Gmail in particular and Google Apps both use the same kind of machine learning capabilities for both applications, whether you're talking about the consumer-facing application or that enterprise solution. The difference is the quote-unquote global rules for delivery might be a bit different if you're encountering an enterprise gateway where those variables and those weights and measures, so to speak, for going to the inbox at an enterprise are going to be highly configured by that organization individually. So the same baseline rules still apply with them, whether you're talking about the consumer Gmail or the corporate solution. But those corporate solutions are highly configurable and a little bit more variable in terms of the delivery rates that we've observed.
Great, thank you so much, Matt. So it looks like we're at the top of the hour here, so we will conclude today's webinar. So I just want to thank everyone for joining. We had a lot of great questions and a lot of great discussion here about Gmail. I would assume that this won't be the last one just because it's such a hot topic, so stay tuned. Stay tuned for more on that. So, and again, thank you for joining us. You'll be receiving an email to alert you about the on-demand status. So when you receive it, if you like this, if that was informative, share it with your coworkers and forward that along. If we weren't able to answer your questions, we'll try to reach out to you personally to answer those questions or some other fashion. So again, on behalf of Henry, Matt, ReturnPath, and myself, we wish everyone a great day. Thank you for joining us and taking the time to view the presentation.